So you guys have been working together for quite a while, yeah?
I did my first Trovatore in 2007, and I was introduced to Maestro in 2007 before I did that gig because I said I was talking to Eric Mawson and I really need to learn this Trovatore, and he's like, "I got the perfect guy for you. He's old school. He'll teach it to you in a week." And I was like, "Yeah, right." So I called Maestro up. I was like, "Hey," he's expecting a call. He says, "Maurice Robinson, if you've been singing the type of roles that you've been singing at the level you've been singing, there's no reason why I can't get this in your head and you singing the whole world in a week." I was like, "Okay, bet, let's try that." Well, I was singing it in 3 days, and I was off book the following week. And my Italian was perfect, my diction was perfect. I don't think we sang a note for the first two sessions. I mean, it just made me. I mean, old school Italian coaching, man. Like we spoke it, spoke it, spoke it, spoke it, spoke. So anyway, to answer your question, that's a long way. We met in '07, and I've never coached another role with anyone else but him since then. So,
Really?
so
Really? So that's super
yeah,
unique. Because like when
yeah,
like in my career, I came up, on the opera chitlin circuit. So my coaches were always where I could find them, like some like lady in
yeah.
a church basement somewhere. And so like like
The scores
the
next to the
roster
hymn.
of coaches that I have span the gamut. So that's pretty unique to stumble on somebody you click with so early and then stay with
Yeah,
for what's it like 20 years now, about
yeah. I mean,
15
it's
years.
yeah, they're about to.
14. Don't get carried away.
We may not make it 20. We don't like each other. We just work well together.
No,
Well, that's
no.
good.
No.
So what like how did that happen? I mean, what about like when you first got together? I mean, of course, that's a great proof of concept right off the bat. Like learning a role in a week, that's amazing. But what made you keep coming back to this relationship? And Michael, what about Morris really drew you to him and sort of solidified this relationship?
Who first? What made me keep coming back was
You say nice things about me, then I'll say nice things about you.
Perfect. That's the way it goes.
well, I'm just gonna tell the truth. What made me keep coming back? Um, he knows style. He's a conductor by trade. That's what he does. But he also coaches. He knows all the styles. He knows all the repertoire. He knows when I go to him, he says, "Now, when you're doing this thing, right here, they're going to take a break here. And the conductor should slow down and let you do this. And traditionally, we do this right here. So you might want to learn it this way. I know what it says, but this is how it goes. Forget this way. This is how it goes." And if I listen to what he says and go into it, I've never gone to a first rehearsal and gotten any notes on any of my choices because he tells me what it, so, you know, as a singer, the best thing you can do is walk into a rehearsal prepared and confident.
Hmm.
And it's tough to walk in there not knowing what to expect. So if I walk in there after I've spent time with this guy, I know exactly what's going to happen, and I know I'm going to be good to go. And that's from Mahler to Beethoven to Wagner to Puccini to all that crap. It's just if I go see him and I put the time in, I can walk into that first rehearsal and know if I just sing the first rehearsal, I can take the rest of the time off because I've already got it figured out. So that's why I keep coming back. Your turn. Say something nice about me.
Well, you know, here's the thing. I have been very lucky in my life. I've been really, really very fortunate in my life and in my life in music because I began very, very early, and I had a number of really, really outstanding mentorial figures in my life from an early age. My first major piano teacher had been a student of Ferruccio Busoni. This is how old this guy was, the great virtuoso at the turn of the century who ran this masterclass in Berlin. And then I had great conducting teachers, Joseph Primavera in Philadelphia, who ran the youth orchestra there for 35 years and who singled me out and made me his assistant. Michael Korn, who founded the Philadelphia Singers, the first professional chorus in America. I was his assistant. Came to New York, got to work with Giuseppe Patanè for years. I followed him around carrying his briefcase and, picking up his coffee checks for years just to learn how to do this thing. Then off to Italy, where I had, Bartoletti and Carlo Maria Giulini. And, I had guys, and I worked for 2 years here in New York as Joan Dornaman's assistant at the Met. This was in the old days.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, well,
Wow.
I mean, I owe her a debt of gratitude in that, she, at that point, I already sort of knew how to wave my arms around, but I needed to know what I needed to know. And I looked for people. my whole life I looked for people who were good at the things that I wanted to get good at, you know. And she was the world's most famous coach in those days, in the 70s and 80s, you know. And I needed to learn, really, even though I was already conducting and I was coaching and everything, but you know, you got to get good at this thing. You got to figure out what you don't know. The most important thing is to figure out what you don't know and find people to fill those lacunae, you know. And I'll just tell you, it's just anecdotal. I mean,
we love anecdotes. Those are our favorite.
Oh yeah. Well, the thing that nobody knows about Joan Dornaman, you know, she's the world's greatest coach. Everybody coaches with Joan Dornaman. She shows up on everybody's resume of a certain age, right? Well, Joan Dornaman wasn't a trained musician. Joan Dornaman has an advanced degree, ready for this, in abnormal child psychology. So she was perfect to work with.
Especially for sopranos. Perfect for sopranos, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I learned a lot of this sort of how to talk to singers, because as a conductor, I used to get a little imperious, shall we say. I'd get a little on my horse, you know, and talk down to people. And so I learned to be a little more empathetic, I think, through her, because when you're working with emotionally disturbed children, it's the same as working with opera singers, basically. So, you know it's true, Morris. Come on, it's true.
Well, I'm no lie detective. I don't have those emotional issues. The lower the voice, the more sane the person. So
that's true. That is true. You know, and you know what we say in the business is that bassists actually they're these like dinosaurs. You know, they really don't have brains; they have nerve ganglion at the base of their spine.
Wow.
Except Morris Robinson. Morris Robinson is a tenor trapped in a bass's body. That's
why I have high notes.
But the thing about Morris that I love, and is that he has a constant questioning mind. I mean, we're talking about a guy here who didn't, you know, he had an untraditional career track. You know, he didn't at 17 go to music school and blah 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 blah, blah and have 37 voice teachers and, you know, and et cetera, et cetera. And at a certain age, they said, you know, that's a nice voice. Why don't you do something? He said, and then he finally did. But he doesn't think like a singer who came through those programs. He thinks, you know, there's a guy, Citadel, you know, outstanding scholar, accomplished athlete. He gets to the point. I mean, he's if he were not an opera singer, I have no doubt that he would be CEO of some major corporation at this point or something like that. Because
I'd work there.
I'd
like to work there.
Yeah, I'd like to work there too. I could sweep up. I mean, I could do any number of things useful to the organization. But no, it's a methodical mind. It's not, you know. Let me just say something about, you know, like you said, oh, well, you know, the proof of concept. Proof of concept is, you know, as I say, I've been fortunate. I started working with singers as a teenager, really, in Philadelphia. We had Curtis Institute and the AVA when I was a kid, and Temple and all this, and I was a teenager. My first opera job, I was called to play a stage rehearsal at the Academy of Music. At the music school, we had a job office. Calls would come in from the Philadelphia Grand Opera Company. That's how long now ago it was. Philadelphia Grand. We had the Grand and the Lyric. The Grand put on the big shows. The Lyric used to do stuff with like Cardboard Flats and like Merry Widow and stuff like that.
Yeah. So, the first 15 years of my career. I understand that.
Chitlin circuit.
Yeah.
And those stunning dressing rooms in the basement with the pipes running through over the head. Right. So the call came in for somebody to play a stage rehearsal for Pagliacci that they needed, because apparently their accompanist, whatever. And I said, oh yeah, I know the last scene of Pagliacci. So I go to the Academy of Music with a little score, and I sit down. They roll out this piano, you know, upright piano on stage. It's the set, and I'm trying to remember who the stage director was. I think it was that fellow from the Italian from the Met who used to do all that stuff. Fabrizio Milano was the stage director. And out walk John Vickers and Teresa Stratas. Oops. And we staged the last scene from Pagliacci, and I just about shit myself. Okay, I was not there, and I had to conduct and play from the piano. You know, not much conducting, obviously, with these two. But what I learned was that, and then I got to like work with singers who were at really, I was lucky. I got in at the tail end of really great times. You know, I went to Italy in the 80s, the early 80s, and was head of the musical staff at the Fenice. And I got to work with singers who were the old guys who were singing since the 60s, you know, and there was a way that you worked. You took the score, you learned the words, you learned the music, you coached it every day, and people learned operas in a week. It was possible. I mean, when Verdi was writing these operas, they were learning them in a week. You know, so why can't that happen now? The idea of it takes a semester to learn the second act of The Marriage of Figaro is, I mean, it's preposterous. Yeah. You're supposed to be learning music. That's your job, you know? And I figured out a way to do it. I for a while there, I had a reputation as sort of the tenor wrangler. I worked with Chikov for a while, and then Chris Merritt was a great friend of mine, and I was his coach and accompanist. We made a record together with these bel canto arias that won all kinds of strange awards. It was a live concert recording. And, you know, and we work his repertoire. He was on the road. He was, you know, in those days he was with Cami. So he was like booked, like overbooked. So we'd be working on 3 operas at once, but you could do it in a week. And, you know, and Morris was proof positive of that, you know, and you got to get this stuff in your head, and you have to get it in a way that it sticks, you know. I mean, I've got this theory when singers come and prepare stuff. My wife is Elizabeth Blanca Biggs, the soprano. I don't know if you know who she is. Yes, she's you know, she got a call. Oh, you know, do you know Electra? And she didn't know Electra. And the call came in, and I was sitting at the piano, and she looked over to me, and I went, and she learned Electra in 19 days. Yeah, and performed it.
Now I got to interrupt you, Maestro. I didn't say this week thing because I showed up a week before it was due.
No.
He had me singing the shit. I mean, singing through it in a week. Sorry.
It's going to clarify that.
We rehearsed it and coached it for a whole month, and before I showed up. The point is, you know, we did the work, and it's old school. It can be frustrating, but you have to humble yourself to where you submit to the process and say, you know what, this guy knows way more than I do. He's helping me learn this, and just go and you bring your lunch bill and you put the work in. So when the process is over, you walk out with all the confidence in the world. So all these young singers that are listening to this broadcast, this is not a quick fix, but if you want to learn your stuff and know it really, really, really well, probably as well as the conductor when you walk in the first day, this is the guy to see. That's how I see it. So.
Well, so my whole thing was, you know, I was watching these singers as I was growing up. When I grew up in there, you know, in the 80s and 90s, we had some outstanding American singers. I mean, we really did. I used to play for some killer people, and you know, I'd play all their auditions, and you know, I was already conducting in Europe, but I'd come back here. I kept an apartment in New York, and I'd now be down there at Studio 58 with everybody else, or down at the Ansonia. Now I'm really dating myself. Yeah. You know, the old guild the Ansonia. You could walk into the lobby and cast any standard repertory opera, and like people would walk by. For real. No, they're really. Wow. I mean, but I realized that singers had to be what I eventually called conductor proofed. That when you left the studio and when you went for that first musical rehearsal, wherever it was, you had to present your product of this role in a way that there just was no way to have an opinion about it because it was outstanding. And if you do that, conductors will not mess with you. So that was my conductor proofing. That's really what I call it. And like Morris says,
they rehire you.
Yeah.
Then they rehire you.
Because also you walk in and not only have you created this thing that is your version of the role, but you have an innate confidence that you project, that you know what you're doing, and you're someone they want to have around. I think that's really also an important thing.
That's really interesting because I was listening to an interview with Jessie Norman about a week ago, and she was talking about, you know, the contrast between the way singers are today and they were in sort of olden times when we didn't know, we were not really scholars back in the old, like I'm talking about, you know, 100 years ago. Like they had like, you were just sort of you were like an instrument that the conductor played. And there wasn't that much scholarship on our side. And as time moved on, singers, you know, they went to college, they got master's, sometimes doctorate degrees. They understood things in a much different way. And that's one of the points that she made, was that you had to show up and be confident and actually have an opinion and not be somebody who just was a tool in the hands of a conductor. But you had to show up with your own opinion. You had to
You got to
show up
bring
with your own.
you got to bring more to the table, but except an appetite. You got to bring more to the table. You really do. I mean, like you see this guy behind me here.
Yeah.
Toscanini, whose house was just down the hill from me here in Riverdale.
Yeah.
You know, I just finished this fantastic book that Riccardo Muti wrote called Verdi l'Italiano, Verdi the Italian. And it's a fantastic book. The problem is you have to read Italian because he doesn't get these books translated.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But he's an amazing writer, besides being an amazing musician. But in this book, he talks about when he was at the Conservatory in Milano studying with Antonino Votto, the great old conductor who was his maestro in Milano. And they would go in, he said you'd accompany him, you're carrying the briefcases or whatever, and you go in the stage door on Via Verdi, though, and you go into the stage door. He said there was always an usher waiting there who would take Votto's overcoat off his shoulders and take his hat, and then Votto would walk right into the orchestra pit. He said in the last production that he conducted at La Scala was Falstaff, Verdi's last great masterpiece. He said, and he'd go in and he'd conduct the rehearsals without the score.
Yeah.
Not the performances. Now, we've all seen conductors who stand up there in the performance. He went in and he knew the rehearsal letters. He knew the bar numbers. I mean, he knew. And he said, Muti said after like the second rehearsal, they were having coffee at the cafe afterwards. He says, Maestro, he says, I mean, how? And Votto said to him, and in Italian, and I'll translate, he said, if you had worked with him, you would understand. And he meant Toscanini, because Toscanini required, even of the singers, a detailed knowledge of every note, every syllable, it's all in the score. It's all in the score. You don't have to add anything. You must find things in the score. And it's a process of time. As you must stare at that page until something just jumps out at you the 7,000th time. Mm-hmm. I mean, like Morris, how many times have you sung Zarathustra?
A gazillion.
Yeah. And every time you look at it, you find something, right?
Yeah. I mean, we just did that last week, didn't we?
If we did do it last week. We found all kinds of things last week.
Yeah. Well, I did Indecent Housing in Holland in English, and I had to do it in Germany. And the person I called, of course, is Maestro. But, in going through that, we found some places where I was normally taking breaths that I shouldn't. This phrase makes more sense if you do it this way. Why not do it? And I've sung Zoroastro at the Meadowlawn probably 100 times. So you're always finding new things. You're always trying to readdress things and make it fresh and giving new ideas. As you become more mature as a musician, your musicianship should change and grow. So I think that, these are the types of things that when I go back and readdress works, especially with Maestro, we find these types of things. And I think that's how you grow as an artist and as a musician, and you keep it fresh, so, yeah.
One of the things that I've always said that was interesting about opera in particular is that there's so much, it's just music in general, because I'm as big a fan of other kinds of genres as I am of the one I make my living in. But it's for me, it's always about universal appeal, but absolute distinction. Because when you hear Morris sing, that's Morris Robinson. And that's what, for me, that when I'm sitting in an audience, that's what I'm coming to hear. I'm coming to hear what Morris has to say about something, and about how his voice is going to work in that. And so, how do you guys preserve that distinction? Because Morris is a singular talent, and he has, people always say, God, the guy's got a voice of the gods. But I always said that Morris is the voice of God. Like if I was casting God. I mean, that's the voice that I would like. That's what God sounds like, Morris Robinson. So how do you make sure, and how do you preserve that, and not just sort of produce the same sort of copy of what you
cookie cutter
over and over again? Yeah.
Well, let me address that.
Of course,
this is not a complicated question. Every piece of music is its own universe. And you have to bring the tools you have and apply them to the interpretation of that piece. Every person has an ideal version, sort of a platonic ideal version of a piece on every given day. And they're always a little different. They're never the same. But it's not a question of keeping Morris as Morris. It's a question of doing the work. It really is about committing the work. And then he sounds like the voice of God, because God is changes, God is a tricky guy, and so it's not a question of keeping Morris as Morris. It's a question of doing work at this level so that every performance, I mean, when he sings the Mahler Eighth, it's a different thing than when he sings Filippo. They're different, but there has to be a level of integrity for each of these works. The language.
I also think that me and my voice so well. So, this is going to sound kind of messed up, but they're like cookie cutter versions of doing things. And then there are ways that he says, well, you know what, with your voice, you could actually do this. Or, when it comes to coloratura with a big size voice, most people kind of fluff it. He won't allow me to get away with that simply because he knows that my voice can move. So, it keeps the authenticity of what I bring to the table because he knows my capabilities. So I don't get away with things that mostly would be acceptable by other people. He knows what I'm capable of, so he forces me to dig deeper, and that's where that hard work comes in, and that's where that knowing one another and working together, collaborating, I think really helps out a lot in that regard because he's not going to let me get away with just doing it.
Well, so. I think you were probably the first bass in 25 years who sang all the 16th notes in Ferrando.
Whoa!
With the grace notes. With the grace notes.
Yeah, and I think just about every review said that too, but that's because you made me do it. So.
Well, I think with Morris, and I think you and I have a similar sort of background in coming to this art form late. I didn't grow up with piano lessons. I couldn't read music till I got to college. I had to learn all how to read music. I didn't understand what theory was. Opera itself is kind of an enigma. And do you feel like that gives you sort of a unique naivete is the wrong word, but it's you come to it much more open and curious, and without the sort of ego of, well, I know, oh yes, of course I know, because like you said earlier, I don't know, that's why I'm here. And do you feel like it's sort of an advantage of not having been brought up in the classical music world?
I think early on it helped me a lot. I've not been one that's ashamed of saying I don't know something, so I'm confident in who I am. I think I'm a pretty intelligent guy, but if I don't know it, I just don't know it. And coming into this world, not understanding a lot of it was very good for me because I was a sponge and I was eager to learn, and people saw that and I think they wanted to help me. It also brought some freshness to it. I wasn't bogged down with, like Maestro said, 18 years of this, 15 old teachers, blah, blah, blah. The voice wasn't burnt out. I was just fresh and I was ready and eager to learn because I sacrificed my whole life to do so. But and I think musically also, it's just, I don't have any old habits, any old ideas. So I think the naivete actually helped me early on. And I think the other thing, I talked to Willard White when I first met him, who was actually singing for Anotamet. We had a talk, and he says, Morris, the thing I love about this business is that you never stop learning. So whenever you get to the point you feel like you stop learning, you should quit. And so I'll have a new piece, I'll have a new composer, I'll have anything new. I enjoy getting it into my system because I enjoy the process of learning. And I love the idea of not knowing everything because I always want to discover. So I think that helps a lot with humility. Yeah.
The discovery phase. That's actually what I call the rehearsal process, the discovery phase. And it's the most fun part for me. Because that's where for me, in the rehearsal room is where I actually figure everything out. It's the laboratory. It's where you get to play and have a good time.
Yeah.
And having a relationship with somebody who has this lineage, this incredible legacy, it allows you a certain amount of freedom to be able to make choices. I hate the fact that when I first started in the business, I didn't have freedom. Mm-hmm. I just didn't know enough, and I didn't have confidence or freedom or any of that because it was a complete enigma, and I was always struggling with the double consonants or that grace note or whatever because it just all felt alien to me. And after this long period of working with Michael, how long did it take you to start really absorbing the information in a way that allowed you to work on things, where you didn't have to go to him every single time in order to get to a certain point, like certain traditions and ideas and concepts that began to become a part of who you were as an artist? And how did that develop between you two guys?
I wouldn't know what it's like to try to discover these themes on my own because I go to him for everything.
Let me throw this in. At this juncture, let me throw this in. There, in my experience of now 45 years professionally, since I was a teenager, there has never been a successful singer of career longevity, that hasn't had a team, cornermen, okay? And I have been very fortunate in that I was included in a lot of those teams of some very great singers, okay? And I watched them operate. And in the old days, it was the managers, when they were really managers, when there was still a business, and they were wheeling and dealing, and the managers knew repertory and voices, and they had the contacts, and the coaches and the voice teachers, because very funny, when the whole time that I was working for Giuseppe Patane, when I was studying with him and assisting him, I was also playing lessons for his ex-wife, who was Rita Patane, who was a voice teacher, who lived with the two daughters on 57th Street. And she was a very famous voice teacher. And whenever the Italian repertory singers came to New York, and I mean all of them, from Mario Sereni down, they'd go and get tune-ups with Rita, and I would play these sessions. So what that meant was, in the mornings I was at the Met assisting Patane, and then in the afternoons I go play lessons, and she'd be sitting there with a cigarette, and she'd interview me about her ex-husband. Well, what's he up to? Is that girlfriend? but so they had a voice teacher, they had a coach, and they had a manager, and everybody was always on the same page, moving the boat forward.
Yep.
Because you got to have cornermen. You got to be a cut man. There's got to be a guy with a bucket. There's got to be a guy with the stool, because this is too hard. It is thinking that you're going to just come out of college and go take a few lessons with this one and a few coachings with that one, and then I'm going to do a summer program where I'm going to get to cover this thing, and then I'm going to have a career. That's trying to run uphill with 50 pounds of cement on your back. You can't do it. It's an unrealistic level of expectation of life. You must have people that you trust just to say, I don't know about this. Oh, this is great. Oh my God, you're amazing. That's not so good. You've got to have, without this team, you're not making it today, especially with the contraction of the business, even pre-COVID. This business has been at the highest levels and the lowest levels, been in contraction for 10 years.
Yeah.
All these companies have cut
2008, down. Man. I look back then, and those of us that were working in 2008, we're the ones that know what's happening right now.
And these fees, and especially in regional companies, is where they were at around 2000. I mean, there's they've taken 20 years back off these numbers, and in Europe too. Because even in Europe, and thank God that Europe has state subvention for their theaters, so they've maintained a certain level of fees. They'll still pay X many thousand. But here in America, without the state subvention, where these people are out there begging and chucking and jiving for quarters and busking on street corners to put operas on, these fees. So you have less chances. So you have got to be that much better.
I agree. It takes a team. It takes valuable people that know their stuff in your corner. They have your best interests at heart, because you know how we are, Michael. I mean, we'll take roles. We'll take anything that's offered to us sometimes. And, you have to have someone sometimes say, don't do it. It's bad for you. Or you have to have them say, well, of course you can sing that. If you can sing this, you can sing that. And so you have to surround yourself with that level of player, that level of team, that level of care. And that's what I find with Maestro and my voice teacher and my management. And I think that, they all, I rely on those three to make pretty much every decision for me artistically. So
from a personal standpoint, like for me, and I'll let that go on, but like I have recently made, in the past 2 or 3 years, the transition into Verdi, and now Wagner is on the next. I've got contracts coming up. This is a world, and once you do one of those things, people start asking you, well, what do you think about that? Can you sing this and can you sing that? And my answer is, I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, let me go ask somebody who does know my voice and who knows the repertoire, because I just don't. It's impossible for me to have a complete understanding of the repertoire and every single role within that repertoire and know what suits me best. And having the guy in your corner is so important. Somebody that does know all these things and has a breadth and a depth of knowledge to be able to help you make those decisions. Because I find that all the time I get people asking me about, do you want to sing, Iago, or you ready to do this? I mean, my first Verdi role was Rigoletto out of the canon. It was with you, Morris.
Boston lyric opera.
Yeah. And I was like, I mean, I would hate to hear the recording of that, because I think I would probably jump off a bridge just to be like.
I thought you sang well, man. You had to wear that big ass boot. The boot kept getting bigger every act.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know how you're going to get through this wearing that boot, but you were great.
I think I still have back problems from that day. Yeah.
Well, and it's well, as you say, it's seductive. You got to be careful, because we're also in a condition today, and I got to be careful about this probably, but you know what? I don't care.
Yeah, I like that.
These people aren't paying my bills.
Yeah.
We have had a remarkable diminution in terms of musical and vocal culture of the people who run opera companies. They're not the people they were 30 and 40 years ago. They're not the experienced singers who had 30 and 40-year careers and then crossed over to administration. They're not, they ain't Rudolph Bing. In the old days, like it or not, opera companies were run by conductors. Why? Because the conductor at any given moment is the only one who knows everything that's in that score. And in the old days, for example, when Toscanini was running La Scala in the 20s, the quote unquote golden age, which he reorganized the entire theater, there was no stage director. There was a thing called a stage manager. The conductor worked with the singers, and the stage manager would more or less set out a kind of vague blocking, which the conductor required the singers to then do what it said to do. Mm-hmm. Do what it says to do, You can't say, "Oh, come here," while you're walking in the opposite direction. Stuff like that.
We'll just change the third title; it'll be fine.
Well, exactly. So we went from conductors running opera companies to stage directors running opera companies to administrators running opera companies, and unfortunately, a lot of them are not culturally prepared. And they're going to make you offers that are maybe flattering and seductive, but they're based on a, shall we say, generously, a dearth of information. Mm-hmm. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous times we're living in, especially when a young singer, like somebody like Morris, who is a young singer, he's on a trajectory. Morris is on a trajectory. That thing is going like this, his career. Yeah. Everybody wants Morris to do something. Mm-hmm. But not everything they want Morris to do is the thing that Morris should do.
Right. So when I say no, y'all know who told me.
It's on me.
Well, can you give me an example of something, Morris, that somebody maybe threw at you and you were like, "Oh yeah, I like that. I want to do that." And Michael was like, "No, you don't."
I don't want to go there. I don't want to go there, but I'll just say that there are some roles. There are some roles that people hear my voice and they think he'd be perfect for this. And then you take it to your teacher and you take it to someone like Maestro Recchiuti, and they say, "Yeah, but they're not thinking about Act 3." Or, "Yeah, I've heard bassists do this before, but when they get right here, no, you're not doing that right now. You're not. Yeah, you have a great top, but you're not built to stay up there all day." So, the Mendelssohn's Elijah has come my way a lot of times, and I've had to say no to it a lot of times. That's a baritone role, if I'm not mistaken, but people hear me sing high E's and F's and think, "Oh my God, he can do this." But I think it hangs out in a place where I just don't want to reside. And so that's one thing I'll tell you, which is not opera. But there have been a few things that, sound good and sound sexy, but I got to say, you got to be smart about this thing. It's about sustainability and longevity and making smart choices. And I'd rather sing for 20 more years than sing for 5, So, yeah.
You spoke a bit, Michael, about sort of the diminution of the culture of people like yourself that have, like, what do you see looking at the landscape of the business as it is now? And it's really interesting that even like in the 21st century, I mean, you saw opera companies popping up in every backwater everywhere all over the country, but a corresponding sort of diminishing of that sort of expertise, and that sort of, it was sort of everybody can just do anything and let's go for it. Do you see any way out of this, or is this a natural progression that will maybe the pendulum will swing back the other direction, or are we just on an interminable path at this point?
Well, I think the problem really is people are going to have to decide what opera is.
That's a good question.
Okay, this is I think the biggest problem in the landscape. You know, they're a big part, whether you like it or not, of being in the opera business in a position of responsibility is curatorial. We are museum curators. We have these objects. It's like, you know, it's like the Uffizi in Florence or the Louvre. We have this collection of artifacts. We have Rigoletto. We have Götterdämmerung. We have all this, you know, we have these things. And you may feel that there's some way that this thing has to be made relevant for your audience, when in fact, if you simply present an outstanding representation of this object the way it was conceived, people will react to it.
They'll get it.
I don't buy this. We have to update. We have to do this. We have to change the venue. We have to change the races. We have to change the voice parts. I need a transvestite baritone. I mean, you know, I just don't think it's about relevance.
Yeah.
Opera is magic. Art is magic. You've got to create magic. People don't go to the theater. This was the big problem I always thought with, like, Bertolt Brecht, that whole school of German, you know, that East German thing, which developed into
Zeittheater.
Yeah. People have grim realities. I don't want to go out and watch 2 more hours of grim reality. I want to see some kind of something that uplifts me, that gives me an idea that there's beauty in the world, that there's a human artistic accomplishment, and all it has to be is something that's done exceptionally well. You know, everybody was down on Zeffirelli. I got so tired in New York of listening to all the critics about Zeffirelli, and it's all kitsch and it's all that. You know, that Bohème at the Met, come on.
Mm-hmm.
Another fascinating thing that Riccardo Muti says at the end of this book that I was just referencing earlier, he says he learned something very important from both filmmakers that he's known, who he worked with as registe, as stage director. He says, the object on stage must be comprehensible to the audience. If what you put on there as a visual image is confusing, you distract the audience from the actual object.
Yep,
that's true.
Preach.
I mean, this is Riccardo Muti 4 or 5 years ago. He wrote this book, and I read that, and you know, it seemed so simple, but it's so true.
If I want a riddle, I'll go to the Sphinx, but I'm going to the theater.
How much? I don't want to think too much about cultural references and cultural depth and resonance. And oh, here's a citation of a painting by Ingres, and here's a citation from a poem from Auden. No, I want to see this piece that this guy wrote, and I want to hear people sing it stunningly.
And you know, one thing about it is that, and the point that you made about the updating of things, and somehow that's supposed to be intellectually superior to something else or whatever, that drives me crazy, because I think that impulse to lean into contemporary subjects and ideas is noble, but you can accomplish that through a thing called a contemporary opera, and you can do all of that in a contemporary opera that you don't have to do another thing.
Sidebar to that thought. What is there that's not universal in Rigoletto if you said it where it's said? Mm-hmm. If the people are doing what's written there, if you do not relate to that poor guy, then it's a bad production. I don't care if it's in 14th century costumes or if it's in, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I mean, it doesn't have to be on a street in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. It doesn't have to be. It has to. the truth comes out in the garb that it is. You know, look at, for example, Mahler's Das Lied von der Erde. You know, I don't know if you know this piece at all, but it's these fantastic poems, and this is his masterpiece, his last great masterpiece. It's based on Chinese poetry, but it speaks to you. The Chinese poetry is so profound in the music of in this late romantic music of Mahler. You feel the melancholy, you feel the loss, you feel the love, you feel the joy. We don't have to dress people up in, you know, dragon costumes.
The courtiers are hipsters. They're all in crazy mustache and skinny jeans. Well, how, like, you know, this pandemic, I mean, you can't avoid talking about it because it's a part of our landscape, and it will have a knock-on effect for 150, 100 years in our business. And, you know, Morris, you just said, starting out the thing, that you were just working with Maestro too long ago. Now, did you go up to Philly? Or you live in Philly, right, Maestro?
No, I'm in Riverdale, New York.
So did you go to New York to work, or did you guys do it over Zoom or something?
He was in Munich making a movie.
Yeah. So how does that work? I know people are dying to know, because voice lessons on Zoom have been a nightmare for me. You know, I can't get it done.
I've done master classes on Zoom, nightmare. I've done all kinds of stuff on Zoom, nightmare. You know, I liken it to when I bought this iPad Pro that I'm on right now, thinking I can put all my scores in there and I can use I hate using it as a score. I need my paper and my highlighter and my this and that. And I'm old school. I need that. It works for me.
I need to be able to see what's coming, because I need side-by-side pages.
Yeah. It's something about it. I got the page folded right here because I know this hard part's coming up, whatever there is. But I reluctantly said, hey, Maestro, we got to do this thing over Zoom. And I hated doing it. I've had one Zoom lesson, and I had a Zoom coaching, and I was with him. But, you know, we're pros, and we've done this for a while, so we knew how to get around with it. And it was the piece that we both knew so well. Didn't need to score. You know, we just need to work. I need to pronounce things, and we just need to work on phrasing. So it was actually,
it was on minutia. It was on. Let's be very clear about this. This wasn't this was about a couple of points because this was, you know, he was preparing to lay down a soundtrack that will be memorialized in a feature film where things have to be, and, you know, you have to make sure that the consonants were opening at just the right point. You know, the nano. Yeah. It was that kind of thing you can do because you can hear it. But in terms of a general lesson, I mean, I would never pretend to be able to coach anybody on, you know.
Yeah, it was fine tuning, and it was fine tuning something that we both already knew really well. And like you said, the minutia made it. You know, we could do that over Zoom, but I'm over it. I think that this is not successful. I think we need to be in front of one another. I'm tired of listening to concerts online. I'm tired of hearing it from my computer speakers. I want to be back in theaters. It's really been tough, you know. It's been tough.
I mean, like, one of the things I've been doing a lot of digital stuff just because I can't stand not to do something. And I've actually been able to earn a little money here and there doing things, but it always feels like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah.
What's unique and beautiful about what we do is the acoustic nature of the voice, especially with Morris's voice when he's in the hall and singing, and you feel it like in your lower spine. Like, I don't need a chiropractor.
Yeah.
I got Morris.
You got a Morris adjustment.
Well, it's hard to replicate what we do.
Yeah.
It's impossible. It's opera. The opera does not exist on a screen. It just doesn't. I mean, it's a different thing. It's a video. If you're making videos, you're making videos, and you can make great videos. And there are great opera videos, but they're not live performance. A live performance is not something that translates successfully into a video. Yeah. But there's another aspect, which is from the pedagogical point of view. You know, this thing that we do is oral tradition. You can read all the books you want. You can go get all the advanced degrees in pedagogy you want to do. But the stuff that you need to know, somebody had to be standing next to you and showing you how to do it physically. And it has to be passed on orally and not digitally. There's something about coming into a lesson with someone. I mean, I think back to my especially like my piano lessons. I mean, when I came to New York, my piano teacher was this little short Israeli guy. His name was Joseph Saiga, who had been Misha Elman's accompanist. You know, Misha Elman, the great violinist. So this guy, he played with everybody. I mean, he played with Heifetz, he played Jost, he was the greatest. And I wanted to study with him because I wanted to learn to be a great accompanist, as a conductor, as a pianist, or whatever. My master's degree was in chamber music and accompanying, not in conducting. I was conducting, but I wanted to learn about music. And the physical presence of coming into this guy's studio at the Manhattan School of Music, and it was the Elman studio. This was drapes and a big portrait of Elman and these two grand pianos. It was so intimidating, the physical thing, that you felt that you were doing something special. Everything has to be special. This is what I spend my life trying to make magic with people. It's got to be special. It's got this thing. You're not working in a bank. There's nothing wrong with working in a bank, but this isn't working in a bank. Yeah. You know, this is not working at Popeyes throwing sandwiches together. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's not what this is. This is, you got to figure out a way to find the essential magic in these things and transmit it to people. And that's what Morris does so great. I mean, when Morris lays on, you know, he comes into a cadence and there's like a hush in the room before the applause starts, because there's this palpable, it's a thing. It really is a thing. And if you don't believe in the thing, you don't believe in God, and you shouldn't believe in music.
I mean, if you're gonna do alchemy, you better know an alchemist. You know,
you gotta have a wizard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this is I mean, what's great about when I have such two engaging guests is that we burn through the time like this so fast. And so these are you can't. I'm going to have to wrap it up here, but it was so amazing to be able to talk to you two. And we are, you know, Maestro, you said something earlier about curation, and I think that we've in a time that we're in, we've never been at a time when there's more information available to everybody. I mean, every book you can possibly imagine is on the Gutenberg Project. You can find it online. You can find this information. But it's the curation that is lacking, not only in opera, not only in scholastic circles, but just in society. And so, you know, your point about curation is so important. And I hope that as we are in the height, we're starting to come to the end of the information age, that we start to lean on folks like you for the curation of this incredible wealth of information. But it's too much for people I cannot possibly. I can't digest it all and pull out what I need. We need folks like you, and I'm so glad that you exist. I mean, I think, you know, I'm glad I have your email because I've got a Trovatore coming up this summer. So
hey, go see him, man. Go see him.
Happy to see you.
Yeah.
You guys have some final thoughts?
I got to see him again too. I'm going to see him before I go do it again. So
nice.
Oh, we got to work on Tongue Hoiser too, bro.
Yep, I pulled that out yesterday, and there's a lot of marked pages for that old Landgraf. A lot of pages.
It's gonna take me longer than a week to learn that, so let's get on it.
Yeah, I've got an Albrecht coming up in a couple of years, so
nice.
That's a lot of words.
That is.
Hey, man. Hey.
Well, thank you both so much for taking time out of your day. I know that anybody who listens to this is going to get an absolute unique perspective on what it means to have this kind of experience and kind of relationship. And I want to thank you so much for taking the time out today.
Thanks for the opportunity, man.
Right on.
Thank you for having us.
It was a pleasure to meet you, Maestro. Absolutely.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Peace. Bye. Someone call you. All right. Take care.